What's up, guys? How is it going? All right, I know I haven't posted a video in quite some time. I have been playing a fair amount, actually, although mostly old school these days, which you can't really play online. You certainly can't get opponents, even if you can get a deck together. But I have been playing a reasonable amount of EDH, especially the new format, which I've been figuring out as I go. It's very interesting, actually, how the changes have affected the format in terms of what's been dominant. Certainly the old linear strategies of just running partners and a lot of 1 and 2 mana spells has gone by the wayside, although those appear to still be among the top tier of competitive decks, which doesn't surprise me because there's so many good cards in that slot. But I think that there is room in the ecosystem for bigger mana decks, and this game is an exhibition of that. I am playing my staple standby Nin the Pain Artist, and I just played what is certainly the best game I've played in 2018, maybe the best game that I've played online in the last decade or so. Totally insane, guys. This game is ridiculous, and the replay works, so buckle up and get ready. This game is insane. All right, I'm up against Biscatard, and he is playing Azusa, Lost But Seeking. Mono green commander you don't see too often. I honestly think in this format, Azusa is probably the weakest of the green generals, mainly because with all the great artifacts in the format, you don't have to depend on lands as much, and you can run a lot of the good artifacts to accelerate. And I think that makes Omnath potentially the strongest of the 3 mana generals. I'm just saying that based on my instincts. I haven't played Azusa much or played against it, but in my experience, this deck is very random in terms of what kind of land density you get and how well you're able to abuse your commander. And often you play Azusa, you play one more land, and then you've got this 1/2 commander that doesn't do anything. So I'm playing Nin, of course. This deck is almost identical to the regular multiplayer list, with the exception of 3 cards. It's missing Sensei's Divining Top, Strip Mine, and Baral, Chief of Compliance. And in place of that, I have an Izzet Boilerworks, an Abrade, and I think a Chrome Mox. I think those are the 3 changes that I've made. But the deck basically functions the same. It still has the same explosive ability to dominate the game with Nin and ramp with artifacts while controlling the game and eventually winning with this guy right here, Tezzeret the Seeker. So I've got a very keepable hand going first, an island and a Misty Rainforest, so it's a snap keep with no question. Kick this off here. It's really going to come down to whether or not I draw a 4th mana source to ramp into the Thran Dynamo. But very happy with this hand. It's going to really depend a lot on what he does turn 2. But what I've found a lot with the Azusa deck is if they get a really good Azusa-type draw where they get 3 mana and their commander and a bunch of other lands to accelerate, they don't generally have more than 1 or 2 big threats. And if you can counterspell those big threats, you can often just win the game from there. He's got turn 1 Bird's Paradise. All right, well, I figured he'd have something like that. All right, good. Island, that's really, really important. So this means I certainly play the Felwar Stone this turn rather than casting the Remand, or sitting on 2 mana to play the Remand. If I had not drawn another land there, I almost certainly would have just sat on Remand with the intention of either remanding his next play if it wasn't a general. I don't think I would remand Azusa. I don't think that there's any reason to do that. You can just remand the bigger things that come later. And then next turn I would play Felwar Stone plus my 3rd land and be able to remand that turn and have the 4th mana available to cast the Thran Dynamo. But this allows me to guaranteed play Thran Dynamo next turn since I drew the next mana source. All right, so the question is, does he have 2 lands to go with it? There's 1, there's 2. Okay, so he's got a fair amount of mana. He's already got 5 to match my 3. And he could have as many as 8 next turn. So that remand is going to be really, really important to sit on. So my plan this next turn here is to just cast Nin and sit on the remand and wait to see what happens. And then I draw Force of Will. So that really changes things a lot, actually. That's a hell of a draw. I'm going to play the Thran Dynamo here now, since I intend to just play the Tezzeret the Seeker the next turn and start untapping these artifacts to make tons of mana, as he doesn't have really much of a board presence. And then use Tezzeret to go get Veldic and Shackles, steal one of these guys and go to work with Nin, which is often how you just demolish mono green. You can't really interact with it that well outside of their small range of things that kill artifacts. Well, obviously they have a million cards that kill artifacts, but they don't really run that many. All right, this is going to be a big turn here. And he starts off with Mana Crypt, which he must have just drawn. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, he played Mana Crypt. Well, I'm not going to counter that because the far worse follow-up here, the card that would probably demolish me in this situation, and this brings him up to 7 mana. There's so many things in this range that can just crush you. If he has 1 more land, he could play Terastodon and kill all my islands. He could play Vorinclex to totally screw me over. although I would be able to at least bounce it with Rift. And he could have something like Primeval Titan. There's just a million awful things that he could play. So as good as Mana Crypt is, I just assume he's got more mana in hand anyway, since he did play 2 lands last turn. He could easily have 2 or 3 more lands, so I don't think that the Crypt really is that big of a deal. And I'm thinking, well, the other thing he could have here that would just totally blow me out is Skull Clamp. And sure enough, right afterward, he plays Skull Clamp off of the mana from his Mana Crypt. Totally ridiculous. I can't let him play that because that's essentially drawing 4 cards for 3 mana. Because he'll easily clamp the birds and the plant and probably draw into other things that he can also, like a fetch land that would get a Dryad Arbor, he could draw 2 more cards. I cannot contain him with a Skull Clamp in play, so I have to force that, which really sucks because he still has a lot of mana available. Potentially, if he's got 2 more land in hand, 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah, he could play an 8-drop here and totally wreck me, but I got to take the risk. And he lets the mana drain away. Oh no, he uses it and he has Eternal Witness. Good lord. It's like perfect, perfect, perfect. And that sets the theme for the way that this game is going to unfold. If you think these are perfect draws, just wait till you see what's coming later. My goodness. All right, so he gets his Skull Clamp back and immediately plays it and clamps away his plant, which I completely agree with. And gets to draw 2. He's up to 4 cards in hand. And after thinking for a little while, he clamps his bird away too, which I think is a decent play because he wants to get more lands to just gas up with Azusa. The bird only makes 1 mana. He could easily draw into 2 or 3 more land. And he hasn't played a land drop this turn, so he could just play 3 more land and do more stuff, like clamping the Eternal Witness and drawing 2 more cards. This is so disgusting. And then magically he has no land, which is kind of a good and a bad thing when you consider it. He does have, what is this, 6 mana here? So that's a good thing, I guess, in the sense that a lot of his probably devastating stuff is above that, but at the same time it means that he has 6 spells in hand, and all I have is a crummy Remand. And he's still got the ability to clamp the Eternal Witness. That last turn was so insanely brutal. But I mean, what could I do, right? I forced the one thing that I really needed to stop, and he had regrowth in the form of a 1 toughness creature. So I'm just going to soldier on and see what happens. All right. Dak Faden. Wow. All right. Keeping with the theme of insane top decks. So I have a really, really tough choice here. There's so many different ways I could take this turn. I'm very certain I want to play Dak Faden, and the question is, do I take Skull Clamp or do I take Mana Crypt? And as much as I would want to deny him the ability to use Skull Clamp, he already has 6 cards in hand. The damage from this thing is already done. And even if he's not able to clamp his Eternal Witness to draw 2 additional cards, I feel like the fact that he has 6 spells in hand means that the ability of Skull Clamp to draw extras isn't really that relevant right now. It's going to matter much later in the game, and we're dealing with the present at this point. And at the present, the 2 Mana Crypt is way more dangerous. Plus, I could use 2 additional generic mana and have no real use for Skull Clamp outside of clamping Nin, which I actually have done in the past after stealing Skull Clamps away from people. But I'm not in that dire straits right now. And I look at the mana here. I would really, really like to keep the Remand back. At the same time, I know he doesn't have any land in play. In his hand, because he would have almost certainly played them last turn. And that means that if I steal the Mana Crypt away from him, he'll only have 4 mana. He could certainly clamp the Eternal Witness, but that would cost 1 mana. And even if he drew 2 land off of the Skull Clamp, he would only have 5. And that may mean that his next play isn't particularly devastating. So with that in mind, after tapping and untapping my mana a bunch of times here, just sort of eyeballing it, I wish just Fellwar Stone was a blue mana source. It would have made things a lot easier. I eventually settle on tapping out, letting the ability to Remand go away, and playing both my Planeswalkers, which I have exactly enough mana to do. By doing this, you see me just testing. So I play Tezzeret, I go for 0. You can see the contents of the deck currently. So there's Chrome Mox, there's the Abrade, and then finally there's the Is It Boilerworks hanging out right there. I messed around with Myriad Landscape. In fact, I've got another video that I recorded and haven't posted yet where I have Myriad Landscape in the deck still, but I determined that it was too slow. And Boilerworks is really, really good in a format where there's only a single copy of Wasteland in most decks, and you don't have to worry about strip mine. So I'm going to get Mox Opal here. That gives me exactly enough mana to play Dak Faden, and as I stated before, I will steal away the Mana Crypt, which is quite delicious. And that drops him down to 4 mana, so suddenly I'm actually not feeling too bad here. But we'll see what happens. Alright, so it goes back to Biscotard's turn. Alright, so he plays a land, which he's certainly top-decked, and then inexplicably he clamps his Eternal Witness before combat. Like, dude, I have a Tezzeret the Seeker in play. You could just kill it right now. Like, all he has to do is just throw Skull Clamp onto Azusa and run both of these guys into Tezzeret and kill this threat off. This thing makes 5 mana right now. That's absolutely ridiculous. I cannot believe that he would do that. Or he could I guess, clamp this thing and send this guy at Dak Faden and use Azusa to take 2 counters off Tezzeret, which would prevent me from getting a wide range of things. Instead, he just decides he really, really wants to clamp pre-combat. And I am so happy to see him do that. Just inexplicable. And he plays Yavimaya Elder, which is an amazing card with Skull Clamp in the first place, and even more crazy with Azusa, because you get to play the 2 land. You draw 2 cards and get 2 land and play the lands right away. Absolutely disgusting. Skull Clamp is so good. Remember how I said it wouldn't matter, but with Yavimaya Elder, it sure still does. So now he clamps Azusa, and I'm thinking here, please, please, please attack Tezzeret, attack Tezzeret, attack Tezzeret, attack Tezzeret. Because honestly, based on my game plan currently, I intend to just use Tezzeret to untap stuff, and don't need it to actually tutor for anything big. Dak Faden draws me 2 additional cards to get me out of this hole, and sure enough, he does exactly what I want him to, and he attacks Tezzeret rather than taking one of the Planeswalkers off the board. And he's done. All right. Somehow I went through that turn. He throws away Kodama's Reach. And what's the second card here? Woodland Bellower. Jesus Christ. When your opponent has, what is this, 7 mana in play and he throws away Woodland Bellower, you know that his hand is pretty stacked. You can't be too happy about that. All right, so I take 3. Come on, Dak Island. All right, well, that makes the Dak Faden in play a hell of a lot better. So, of course, I use Dak Faden. And I get Whir and Factor Fiction. So awesome. All right, so as much as I would like to Whir of Invention here and go ahead and fetch out Veldic and Shackles to steal away the Azusa, I feel like I probably have a reasonable chance of getting the Shackles later on with Tezzeret anyway, and Factor Fiction could yield a wide range of things. I'm really uncomfortable having just a Reman for defense, and honestly, I'm thinking right here, a way that I can just win this game on the spot is if I get Amnesia, and there's several ways that I could get it, and I decide that because I have all this extra mana from Tezzeret, that if I Factor Fiction, I could get a Tutor Chain, or I could just draw the Amnesia outright, and I could just demolish this 7-spell hand and possibly win the game on the spot. So I'm going to take that route. That means throwing away the Island and the Whir, and just tap Opal and Thran Dynamo, since I can untap them with Tezzeret and cast Factor Fiction. Be good to me. All right. Expedition Map, Into the Royal, Spell Pierce, Negate Island. Not great, not the worst. It does at least have a negate for big mana shenanigans with the deck, which a deck like his is almost certainly going to be pulling. The Spell Pierce obviously very useless, so that's just going to subtract 1 card away. I don't really see Into the Royal being all that useful either. These mono-green decks tend to have a lot of things that do stuff when they come into play, so a bounce effect other than protecting your own stuff isn't all that good. The map, not great either. I could get a Strip Mine, but he doesn't have like a Cavern of Souls in play or a Homeward Path or something that I would need to deal with. And that's going to really determine what I do. I really kind of want to get the negate. And honestly, if he had put 4 and 1, I probably would have taken the 4 pile. But I figure any 2 pile he makes with the negate, I'm going to take that. And after thinking for a while, he gives me this hand, which I'm more than happy to take, given the fact that it gets rid of 2 of the relatively useless cards and gives me more mana as well as a negate. So I'm going to do that. Play the Island, untap these 2, and play Min the Pain Artist. And not feeling great here, but at least I have the mana available to both negate and remand. So if he makes one big play in the form of a green X spell or in the form of a big creature, I can counter it, and then Tezzeret can survive 1 more hit, at which point I can untap, use Tezzeret to generate 5 additional mana and draw like 14 cards off Min or something. So that's what I'm hoping for. Alright, what is he going to do? Play Scrying Sheets, kind of cool in his Snow-Covered Forest deck. And he's got Reclamation Sage. Arg. Well, as much as I would like to counter that, I can't really do it because Nin's summoning sick. Gives him another 1 toughness thing to clamp, which also sucks, and it denies me 6 mana next turn, which is really painful. But what can I do? I'm not going to remand it because his follow-up play might be a hell of a lot worse, and sure enough, it is. All right, that's getting remanded for sure. Back in your hand, Primeval Titan. That's a thing you don't normally have to deal with in this form. It's a creature you don't normally have to deal with in the multiplayer format as it's banned, but it's legal in 1v1, and it's definitely one of those cards that's kind of right on the cusp of possibly being ban-worthy, given the fact that it's so easy to ramp into it with cards like Mana Vault and Mana Crypt and Soul Ring and stuff. You can play Primeval Titan on turn 2, which is just insane. Like I don't understand how any deck could deal with that or beat that, short of just countering it. So here comes the Azusa, and this time he goes after the correct Planeswalker. He's going to kill off Dak Faden. Get rid of that, which I'm sad to see go, but it means that I can't steal his Skull Clamp. He is at least tapped out here, so I can steal immediately. Alright. Take another 3. That's going to be a common theme this game, and I draw Dissolve. God, the timing is so perfect on that, too. Whew. I was so worried about that Primeval Titan. I mean, I feel like, I don't know what's in his deck, but it could very easily just be game-ending. You could get the Dark Depths and Thespian Stage thing and just immediately combo out a 20/20 with it, which is pretty impossible to deal with. But as much as I'd like to keep Tezzeret in play, his value just went down tremendously with the death of the Thran Dynamo. So I figure, okay, well, it's time to go get Veldic and Shackles and prevent him from clamping his Reclamation Sage. And I thought a little bit about waiting for him to untap to see if he would in fact clamp it, but I don't really want to give him an untap step right now if I can avoid it. I'd rather just steal it outright. So I'm just going to grab this guy with the intention of dissolving the Primeval Titan and then shooting the Reclamation Sage at the end of the turn for, it looks like, 2 cards. And then doing the same thing to his Azusa. So, not in the hole completely here. I feel like he still has a big advantage, given how many extra cards he's already drawn. But we are actually tied, 76 to 76, so I'm not too far behind. Alright, he does have a little bit more mana than me, but not much. Primeval Titan comes down, so happy to see that played. And I'm going to dissolve in a heartbeat. There's an island on top, definitely going to tuck that to the bottom. Alright, what's the follow-up? He's got 3 mana. And I was hoping he'd play something like Song of the Dryads on this that I could just negate. And he plays Cursor of Krufix. Alright, well that's amazing, because I can just take that and shoot it next turn. And he'd be totally screwed, right? I've got this game in the bag. Right on top of his deck is Homeward Path, and it's about to get even worse than that. So he plays Homeward Path, obviously, off the top. There's another land. So he gains the life here. And then, inexplicably again, he just taps it. And of course, that gives me the opportunity, because as long as he's got an untapped Homeward Path in play, I can't shoot his creature. Like, I have no ability to shoot his creature. If I use Nin ever, he just gets his guy back. But he taps the Homeward Path. And in response, of course, I just blow up Reclamation Sage and draw 2. So now not only is the Homeward Path tapped, which means I can grab the Cursor and kill it, but I get to draw 2 cards as well. Pretty damn good. Thanks, man. Alright. Trophy Mage, Steam Vents. Not bad. Alright. And look at this. So he gains a life, he plays a land, and I'm thinking, looking at his mana, I'm literally saying this out loud. My son was sitting on my lap watching this game. I've got 7, 8, 9 lands, and I'm thinking, okay, well, he's only got 4 cards in hand left. I'm about to get a big Nin activation off. The only way I can possibly lose this game is if he draws Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn. Or, I'm sorry, the Promised End. And literally, it is the card on top of his deck after he plays a forest. This goddamn thing. So insane. Alright. Well, I mean, what the hell do I do, right? It's almost certainly death. I'm going to have Nin, I guess, kill herself for 1 and somehow get these cards out of my hand. He's going to, like, play Trophy Mage, get something important, and then get the negate out of my hand and tap me out, and I'm going to have to deal with a 13/13 that has pro instants, and I'm at 21 with a Mana Crypt in play. Like, this game's over. Completely over, because the guy, after this crazy sequence of stuff earlier with this Mana Crypt and his Skull Clamp and getting his Homeward Path, and the Reclamation Sage also has Emrakul. Like, I was feeling so salty here. It's just... I mean, it was still going to make an amazing video regardless, because his top deck luck was so insane. But there's only one way you can match top deck luck with better top deck luck, and that's coming up. Alright, so I untap the Shackles. I take my obligatory 3. And I'm starting to actually get a little concerned about this, because even if I'm able to stabilize, if I'm too low, the Crypt might wind up killing me. Alright, come on deck. Draw Mana Leak. That's not bad. That means that I can actually stop the Emrakul from at least coming into play and killing me, even if he does have control of my turn. But that's super, super important, at least. And I figured I'd have the ability to draw some cards, although I don't know how many I would draw, given the fact that I don't want to load my hand up too much when he's going to have control of my turn. So I take the Cursor, and look at that, guys. On top of my deck, the one out in my entire deck that can actually handle the Emrakul that he has on top of his deck. There is a freaking disallow there. Absolutely amazing. Alright, so I take 2 damage here. I think about this for a bit. And I realize I need to keep 5 mana untapped, which means I can only short... I'd love to be able to just blow his Cursor up completely, which I could do if I were to shoot it for a total of 4, and that would drop it. That would drop me down to just 2 mana. So, but that doesn't allow me to both disallow and Mana Leak. So I'm going to shoot it for 1 before his Homeward Path untaps. There's a mountain on top. And had I known that, of course, had I known that there was a land on top, I could have held off on playing the Steam Vents before tapping my Nin. So that was actually a mistake. I should have just shot it for 1 and waited to see if there was a land on top, because that would have netted me an extra card. But I was so just reeling from the fact that there was a disallow on top of my deck, I just couldn't believe my good fortune. But I've got 5 mana ready and set up in this crazy scenario. Of course, he can just steal his cursor now. So that's 8, 9, 10, 11. And surprisingly, despite the fact that we're this far into the game, he actually only has, what, 2 different things in the graveyard. He's just got sorcery and creature in the graveyard. So he has to tap his homeward path in order to play the Emrakul. So he thinks for a long time, I think he's checking the mana. Finally, full tap out. Emrakul. There's the ability on the stack, the Mindslaver. No, sir. I have Disallow in my hand. Counter it. And Mana Leak it. Absolutely nuts. I just dealt with this completely impossible, insurmountable threat, usually in a control deck, especially by mid-game. And he can't even attack. All right. Untap. Keeping Shackles. Tapped as well. Taking another 3. Oh, this Crypt has just beaten me to death. I think I've taken 15 damage from it already. He's basically... All right, Preordain's really good. I'm going to play the land first. Yeah, I think for a bit here I'm just going to play the land. Since this thing's dying anyway, for sure, I need to kill it before he gets his homeward path untapped. I know I'm not going to be able to play a land for free, so that's fine. And I decide to leave exactly 4 mana untapped here. He still has 4 cards in hand and a boatload of mana. And if I'm able to get super lucky and draw into Rewind, then I can both Rewind and Negate in the same turn, which could be super critical. It's one of the primary reasons why I play with Rewind in this deck, because it allows you to cast 2 counters in 1 turn on these critical turns like this when your opponent has a ton of mana and can deploy 2 big threats at once. So I'm going to draw 5 off the Cursor's Corpse. And look at that. Next card is Rewind and another 4 mana counter in the form of Cryptic Command. So amazing. This game is just back and forth all day long. All right. What do you got, Biscatard? I'm going to have to take some more damage here. He plays land number 12. And he plays Oblivion Stone, yet another backbreaking thing. Oblivion Stone, while not the worst thing in the world, would allow him to keep his stuff in play and would blow up 4 of my artifacts plus Nin. It would take the Mana Crypt off the board, which would be somewhat good. And I guess he would probably just detonate it right away. But I really, really don't want to lose the 4 mana plus the Shackles, even with the stuff in hand. I gave this a little bit of consideration, but realized he only has 3 cards left in hand. And I felt like I could safely Rewind here, as much as I'd like to negate it. But I'm pretty sure I'll have something to negate in a little while anyway, given the fact that an Azusa deck is probably playing with tons of big mana spells anyway. Like that thing that regrows your whole graveyard or whatever and gives you unlimited hand size. Alright, I'm taking another 2. Down to 11. With the Crypt out, and I'm wondering what his follow-up's going to be. And here comes some more big mana. There it is. Genesis Wave for 6. Easy negate target. No question. I'm actually... maybe a little consideration to Cryptic Commanding this just because it's the most efficient use of my mana, but I really need to save the Cryptic Command to bounce this Crypt if it gets more problematic. If I get down to like 5 life, I'll certainly have to just use it for that. So I'm able to negate that, which he probably knew that I had in my hand, but it's not like he had a lot of choice. But that, again, taps out his homeward path. If I were him, I would have Genesis Wave for 5 and left the homeward path untapped because it means I can't steal Azusa and kill it. I lose another 3 life, and I draw Amnesia. Oh, where were you earlier? Now he only has 2 cards in hand, and it's very, very tempting because I'm almost certain those 2 are both probably excellent spells. But I'm going to just take Azusa away from him because I need to get another counter spell to back up the Cryptic Command as I intend to use this. I'm so low in life now, I don't want to lose this game to something as dumb as that. And I get a Jace and a Cascade Bluff, so I'm just shooting his guy right now. And the reason why I shot and left 5 mana untapped is because I needed, if I didn't draw any land, I was going to play Izzet Signet and have the ability to Cryptic Command and cast, cast the Izzet Signet and still be able to Cryptic Command. But I did draw land, so I can just play the Izzet Signet anyway, and I've got 5 available, and that'll allow me to preordain 2 land. Those are certainly going to the bottom. And I draw Command Tower. That's fine. All right. Touch and go. Still got that clamp out there. All right, Sakura Tribuilder is basically just like it's like an inspiration. 3 mana to draw 2. He's at 4 cards. He casts Skyshard Claim. I don't care about that, of course. And he's tapping a bunch of mana, and he has just Azusa. That's totally fine. No problem there at all. And I gave some thought here to using Cryptic Command to bounce the homeward path at the end of his turn, figuring I could grab his Azusa and nuke it for a bunch. But I got another shoot target anyway in my hand, plus the Jace. And I figured, again, the Cryptic Command contingency on my own Crypt. It's pretty much the only way I feel I can lose this game at this point. But, all right. End of turn, so you see me tapping mana and considering it, and then I think better of it and decide not to. I'll use the Cryptic Command in a second if I can get another counterspell, though. All right, come on, deck. Untap the shackles. Come on, baby. One time. Yes. All right, no damage. That's good. Snapcaster. Well, there's the next counterspell that I needed, and that gives me access to all of this crazy stuff. That is phenomenal. And with that in mind, it's time to take a gander at that 3-card hand, which is almost certainly all spells. Amnesia on the stack, and Biscotard scoops it up, bringing this absolutely insane game to a fitting conclusion. I mean, what can I say? This game was just insane. The crazy back and forth, the way that started, how far ahead he was with the Skull Clamp and Mana Crypt, having so much more mana than me having to basically top deck perfect answers in the form of Dak Faden to steal his Mana Crypt. The crazy interaction where he gets Homeward Path after I tutor for Shackles, literally the next turn, and then he has Emrakul, Cool, the Promised End, sitting on top of his deck as well. But then my deck delivers Disallow right back. I mean, Jesus Christ. Have you ever seen a game that was that much of a pitch battle back and forth where both players are essentially casting Vampiric Tutor every turn? I can't really recall a game like that. But I'm so glad that the replay cooperated. I'm so glad you guys got to see that. I really hope you enjoyed it. I've got 3 other games waiting in the wings to post. I don't know if they're all with Nin, but man, I'm just pumped. I'm still like shaking a little bit from the way that game wound up. I will be back soon and hope to post more games in this new format as I continue to explore it. See you later.